Hello, and welcome back to our revision series on Weimar Nazi Germany from 1918 to 1939, with our focus on key topic 1, the Weimar Republic between 1918 and 1929. This session will focus on part 2, which is to do with the early challenges to the Republic between 1919 and 1923. Today's content will cover the early challenges to the Weimar Republic, including the early unpopularity of the Republic, the stab in the back theory, and the key terms of the Treaty of Versailles, including the challenges to the Republic from the left wing and right wing. It will also focus on hyperinflation, as well as the French occupation of the Ruhr. In terms of the reasons for early unpopularity of the Weimar Republic, the politicians who set up and ran the Weimar Republic in the early days were the same as those who had surrendered in World War I. They were classified by the right wing and by members of the army as November criminals, due to the fact that they felt that they were being stabbed in the back. The Weimar Republic and the politicians that ran it were always linked to surrender and the harsh peace terms of the Treaty of Versailles, which came later on. The fact that former soldiers felt stabbed in the back was due to the idea that army officials and generals had told soldiers that they were close to victory, when in fact they were actually retreating and they were never really going to win the war. After the war itself and during 1919, the Paris Peace Conference led to the Treaty of Versailles. In terms of the key outcomes of that treaty, we identified them as 4 key terms. One was to do with the idea of blame, which was set out in Article 231, which stated that Germany must accept the blame for starting the war, even though historians are all in agreement that they weren't actually the main protagonists, although they were the main actors during the war itself. After the war, they were told that they had to pay reparations to the tune of 6,600 million, and that was to be paid to Britain, France, and Belgium to pay for the damages during World War I. The third term was to do with the idea of the army. There are many conditions placed onto the military, but the key ones that you need to know is that it was reduced to 100,000 men. They were not allowed to have any submarines or air force, and they were only allowed 6 battleships. The final term was to do with the idea of territory. Germany lost all overseas colonies and lost pieces of land such as Alsace-Lorraine to France, as well as other areas of land to the east to newly formed Poland. The impact of the treaty was incredibly significant. It made the Weimar Republic look politically weak, and that there were many commentators and many members of the public that felt that the government of Germany had simply surrendered. People resented the government for not being strong in negotiating peace terms. However, this was incredibly difficult because they weren't actually necessarily invited to many parts of the Paris Peace Conference, purely because the Weimar Republic had unconditionally surrendered during World War I. A second impact was that the terms severely damaged the German economy. Not only were heavy reparations imposed, but the loss of territory meant that the industrialized lands of the Sudetenland went to Czechoslovakia, and Alsace-Lorraine went to France, meant that there was a reduction in the produce that was fulfilled by Germany. It also damaged German society. The Germans resented the government for giving in to the Allies, and also were not very happy that they were being blamed for starting the war, even though it was started by Serbia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Next up, we're going to look at the idea of the political challenges. So through the outcome of the Treaty of Versailles, as well as the construct of the Weimar Republic, there were many political challenges from the left and from the right. This diagram identifies the differences between the left and right. So the Nazi Party that we'll look at in key topic 2 and key topic 3 will be on the far right, and the communists, the KPD, would be situated on the far left. The Social Democrats, as you can see, who are the rulers of the governing party of Germany at this point, would be classified as centre-left, and they're in a coalition with the Centre Party. So in terms of the political context, there were many radical changes that had occurred in Germany at the end of the First World War. First off, there was an upheaval where the monarchy had been replaced by an elected democratic government, with some feeling that democracy had been imposed upon them. This tended to be from people from the right who wished to keep the Kaiser on the throne. There was also many consequences of the war that was creating unrest in Germany. For example, the naval blockade by the British towards the end of the war had led to food shortages and starvation. Towards the east, in Russia, the Bolshevik Revolution in 1917 fueled further political discontent, and this would be a source of tension for the far left and for the Communist Party. However, Ebert did make a deal with the army leader, in that the army would support the new government in exchange for Ebert supplying the army with goods and ammunition. However, many leaders of the army did not like democracy and did not want democracy, but they definitely did not want a Bolshevik-style government. This dependency on the army severely weakened the authority of the Weimar Republic in the years to come. So let's have a look at the challenges from the left wing, which is primarily from the Spartacist uprising. So as mentioned previously, they were influenced by the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia in 1917 and wished to have a very similar style revolution in Germany. The key individuals that we need to know for this particular uprising are Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht. And the date that this happened was on the 6th of January 1919, very, very close to the end of World War I. The key events for you to know is the idea that the Spartacists attempted to overthrow the government and create a communist state. However, Ebert used the army, the Reichswehr, and the Freikorps, which were a bunch of paid paramilitaries, to put down the rebellion. Because the Spartacists were no match for the army, this led to the outcome of the uprising being put down very, very quickly. The leaders were captured and killed. Soon after, there was a significant challenge from the right wing through the Kapp Putsch. So by 1920, the government was struggling to control the Freikorps that they had hired as paramilitaries, and then attempted to disband the Berlin Regiment in order to control them. As a result, in March 1920, the Freikorps feared unemployment, and so therefore they decided to turn their arms against the Republic. Ebert requested help from the military, but the army refused to help because the Freikorps were former soldiers, and it was a case of Reichswehr will not shoot Reichswehr. The rebels ended up controlling the city and declared a new government. And because the Weimar Republic had lost total control at this point, they were unable to quell the rebellion and urged people not to cooperate and to go on strike. The outcome of this was that the public actually saved the Weimar Republic and followed their requests to go on strike, and so major utilities such as transport and water were stopped. Because Kapp was unable to control Berlin and knew that the game was up, he fled and was later captured and imprisoned. Now let's have a look at the idea of the invasion of the Ruhr. Now, the invasion of the Ruhr is an occupation by France and Belgium of a heavily industrialized area of Germany. The reason for the occupation was to do with the idea of a failure to pay reparations in 1922, as set out by the Treaty of Versailles. The reason why France invaded was because they needed the money from reparations to pay off their debts to the USA that had loaned them a significant amount of money in war bonds to fund their war effort. They decided to take the goods rather than wait for them to be sent, and this was actually legal to do under the Treaty of Versailles. Essentially, Germany could not be trusted to pay off their debts, either in monetary terms or through goods. So the key events to know with regards to the invasion of the Ruhr was that the occupation was met by passive resistance. Passive resistance were the workers going on strike at this point in order to stop the machines and factories from being able to produce the products and goods that France and Belgium needed. In addition to this, the Germans carried out industrial sabotage by disabling the machines in order for the Germans not to be able to produce any goods whatsoever. As a result of this sabotage and as a result of the protests, a number of strikers and workers were shot by French troops. The impact of the invasion of the Ruhr is quite significant for the Weimar Republic. In a positive sense, it united the German people in their hatred against the French. The German government backed the strikers and printed money to help pay them a wage. and the workers were appreciative of this. However, economically, there were fewer goods that were being produced, and this severely impacted on the German economy. It led to more money being printed and ultimately led to a significant event in 1923 regarding hyperinflation. So hyperinflation is the term given to money not being worth anything and the value and prices of goods skyrocketing. So a shortage of goods, primarily due to the Ruhr invasion, pushed up the prices of everyday goods such as bread and eggs. The government's decisions made the situation much, much worse in that they needed money to pay debts. So therefore, because they were unable to obtain money through taxes and because of high unemployment leading to higher payments of benefits, they had to do something else. So in their infinite wisdom, they decided to print money. And by printing more money, the value of the money in the system went down and made inflation much, much worse. The situation got so bad that a loaf of bread went from costing 1 mark in 1919 to 200,000 billion marks in 1923. Now, the effects of hyperinflation had a severe impact on Germany. So we'll look at the negative effects, but there were also some positive effects as well. So normal living became impossible in Germany during the hyperinflation period. First off, there was so much money being printed that the printing press couldn't actually keep up with the amount of money that it needed to produce. People had to carry money in baskets and wheelbarrows just to do their normal weekly shop. And some shops and shopkeepers refused to take any money at all, preferring to have trade instead. Shops were raided by people that were completely and utterly desperate for food, and shoplifting and petty crime was massively on the increase. Everyone severely suffered from the shortages, so foreign suppliers refused to accept German marks for goods, which led to a shortage of food and goods being imported from other countries. The most significant impact was probably the idea that people that had savings in bank accounts became completely worthless. The middle classes were the most affected by this, but it also significantly affected the working classes as well. There were, however, some positive effects of hyperinflation. So people that owed money, such as mortgages and fixed loans, were able to pay it off much easier because the value was completely and utterly destroyed. People who hoarded goods before the effects of hyperinflation took hold were able to keep those goods and sell them for a large profit during the hyperinflation years. And farmers were able to set the prices and benefited by being atop of the production line. So they set the prices that then filtered down into the shops. And lastly, those that had foreign currency benefited by visiting Germany and getting much more value for their money. The Germans obviously resented visitors coming into Germany and benefiting from their misery. So now we're going to focus on a typical question that has come up before in the exams. And this is a 12-mark question in the explain why the Weimar Republic faced challenges in the years 1919 to 1923 as a 12-mark question. The top tip for this question is to ensure that you have 3 aspects of knowledge, or more commonly known as 3 reasons. However, for this question, it is slightly more complicated because if we look at the key reasons, we can say that one of the key reasons is to do with political issues. And with regards to the Treaty of Versailles being a challenge, the Weimar Constitution being a challenge, and the stabbing the back myth being a challenge, is in theory, those are 3 aspects of knowledge that you can talk about. However, there are also significant economic issues that we can discuss as reasons for why they face challenges. So hyperinflation and invasion of the Ruhr were also significant challenges faced by the Weimar Republic. So this is an example of a model paragraph that one can use in this particular 12-mark question. It is a simple point evidence explain paragraph where the point is highlighted in red. The evidence, so what you know about the political issues, is highlighted in brown, and the explanation is identified in green. A significant thing to realize here is that the explanation, the amount that you write for the explanation, is longer than the evidence and much longer than the point. This is because examiners for the Edexcel board are required to look at the explanation, the AO2 first, and then to identify where your knowledge sits. But the explanation is always marked first. So when we look at the biggest challenge facing the Weimar Republic, we can look at this in two ways. First off is to look at the idea of the root cause being the biggest challenge, and the root cause is undoubtedly the Treaty of Versailles. This is mainly because it led to the most amount of challenges as a result of the outcomes. So, for example, the reparations terms led to economic issues because Germany couldn't afford to pay back those reparations, which therefore led to mispayments. It therefore led to the invasion of the Ruhr, and because of the government decisions from that invasion of the Ruhr led to hyperinflation. You could also say that the idea that there was a dictated peace, otherwise known as a diktat, and the dictated peace led to political uprisings against the Weimar Republic as a result of their agreements in the Treaty of Versailles. The second way to look at this is to look at the idea of which challenges affected the most amount of people. And in this instance, it would have to be hyperinflation. This is mainly because it created the environment for right-wing uprisings. At this point, it will be November 1923, and this led almost directly to the Munich Putsch, which was led by Hitler and the Nazi Party. It also created the biggest reputation scar for the Weimar Republic, and we'll notice that as we look at the back end of Key Topic 1 up to and including the Wall Street crash. So, in summary, the Treaty of Versailles and the Stab Back myth made the Weimar Republic very unpopular after 1919. From 1919 to 1923, the Republic was attacked by both the left-wing and right-wing extremists. But 1923 brought new challenges, notably the invasion of the Ruhr and hyperinflation. So that's the end of part 2. Please make sure that you like and subscribe, and move on to part 3, which looks at the recovery of the Weimar Republic.